I'm going to talk today about 10 people that were framed, absolutely framed by law enforcement. Why does this get to me? Does this get to me? Because my dad was framed. 100%, I'll take it to my grave. My dad was framed for a crime he didn't commit. He spent 40 years in prison, and my family was destroyed. So yeah, this matters to me. So I want to read this. I want to see what your opinions are, and hopefully you agree with me on it. Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, I give God all the praise, honor, and glory for that. Something very disturbing is going on. I want to read an article that came out last October 2022, and it's about 10 people that have been framed by law enforcement. Now, when I say law enforcement, that doesn't only mean the police on the street. That means the FBI, that means prosecution, that means the Department of Justice, that means informants who lie, when they get on the stand or make allegations about people that are not true. And it's very, very disturbing. And people, we're living in an atmosphere right now where the truth is it doesn't matter anymore. I mean, just recently, we're hearing now factually from the Department of Energy that the origin of COVID definitely came from the Wuhan lab. We're hearing from, spokespeople from the White House that all of the government doesn't concur on that. It's not conclusive yet. When does all of the government agree on anything? This is their Department of Energy. But remember, for 3 years, we're being told that's not true. And if you said it, you got knocked off of social media. You were discredited. Fauci lied, straight out lied to us. He was one of the ones that funded, the research at the Wuhan lab. So something so vital about our health, about the vaccines. They've lied to us about so many things. So why would you think that we wouldn't put it past them to frame people, put innocent people in jail? It happens quite often. It's disturbing. It's something that shouldn't happen. Prosecution should never violate the law in order to catch the lawbreakers. That's not what they're supposed to do. They have enough tools and enough weapons to do it honestly. And if they can't, well, then that's too bad. Our system is designed to protect the innocent. And like I said, they have so many laws. There's so many laws on the books that they can go after people and gather evidence properly the way they're supposed to. But it's terrible. And I'm really upset with stuff that's going on now. I'm really upset with the way the FBI, is acting on behalf of the current administration. They're running, interference for Biden and his people. We're seeing it. Elon Musk is proving it. People, this is dangerous. This is not good stuff. I don't care who's in office. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. Believe me, if this was happening in the Trump administration, I'd be saying the same exact thing. Because what's more important is our freedom. And when they start to, come after our freedoms, our basic right to speak, our freedom of speech, when they start to come after that, we are in trouble. When they start to lie to us about our health, how many people might have died because the misinformation that was given to us about this vaccine? And it's all coming out now. This stuff comes out in the wash. So, I had to make this statement before I get into this, but I'm going to talk today about 10 people that were framed, absolutely framed by law enforcement. Why does this get to me? Does this get to me? Because my dad was framed. 100%, I'll take it to my grave. My dad was framed for a crime he didn't commit. He spent 40 years in prison, and my family was destroyed. So yeah, this matters to me. So I want to read this. I want to see what your opinions are, and hopefully you agree with me on all of this. This first one, the FBI framed 4 men for murder. Now listen to this. Law enforcement rely on informants for information. Often these are criminals themselves who are in and around other criminals and are willing to share information with law enforcement in exchange for money or leniency when it comes to being punished for their own crimes. But just how valuable should an informant be? Joseph Salvati was imprisoned for 29 years because the FBI framed him for a murder he didn't commit. Framed him for a murder he didn't commit. The man spent 29 years in prison, destroyed his life and his family. They did this to protect the real culprit, a man named Jimmy the Bear Flemmi. Flemmi was an FBI mob informant, and they didn't want to risk losing the information he provided to them. So when Edward Deegan was killed in 1965, the FBI had Flemmi and others give false testimony to convict Salvati and several others for the crime. Did you hear what I just said? The FBI allowed someone to give false testimony because they were using these people as informants to convict an innocent man and give him 29 years in prison. 2 of the convicted men died in prison. They were innocent. And a third was released in 2001. The convictions were overturned, listen to this, after a journalist discovered secret FBI memos that had never been revealed during the trial. They revealed that Flemmi was the true killer and an informant, and that a key witness, another hitman, was lying but helping them on other cases, so they let it slide. In other words, it was more important for the FBI to have help from informants on other cases they were building, helping them with their career. So they sacrificed a man and his family, a couple of men in their family, put them in jail rather, for a crime they didn't commit. This is our FBI. This is the one they put their hand on a Bible, the left hand, and swear to uphold the laws of the United States of America. Framed 4 men. The government awarded Salvati and the others $101.8 million for the frame job. The FBI's lawyers argued they were working at a federal level and the trial was state, so they had no obligation to share information, and the convictions were not their fault. The judge obviously disagreed. So the Fed's saying, well, we didn't have to give that information to the state, but they prompted the people to lie. This is your FBI. Now let me make this clear. Not all agents are like this. The greater portion of them do their job properly and uphold the law the right way. What I'm trying to point out is, there's always a needle in a haystack. There's always some people that are willing to do the wrong thing. But look what they did. They destroyed these men's and their families' lives. Frame up. Let's get to the next one. Number 9, Sheriff Joe Arpaio framed a man for attempted murder. Infamous Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio made news for years as a result of his PR stunts, which included making inmates in his jails wear pink, eat horrible food, work in chain gangs, and more. His office was also known to botch serious criminal investigations, included child abuse and sexual assaults. For all his dozens of controversial acts, it's maybe no wonder that framing people for crimes was among them. And I'll say this, I know Trump, got along with Arpaio. I saw something between the two of them. I don't remember what it was. Maybe Trump honored him for something. I don't know. But if this is true, this guy doesn't deserve any honors. James Seville spent 4 years in prison for trying to build a bomb to kill Arpaio. A jury found that he had been entrapped by Arpaio and his sheriffs, who arranged the entire thing as a PR stunt. The man who showed Seville how to build a bomb was a cop who not only paid for all the parts, he drove Seville to stores to pick them up. So they put a cop in there, to frame this guy, to help him build a bomb to kill Arpaio, but it was a political stunt. The media was waiting when he drove Seville to where he was ultimately arrested. Basically, they arranged the entire scheme and made Seville the fall guy. It was a PR stunt. Seville sued and the county settled for just over $1 million. So there's $101 million, which, you know what? That doesn't give you back 29 years of life in prison. It doesn't give you your family back. And how about those 2 people that died in prison in the former case that I was talking about? So now this one cost him $1 million. Arpaio's not paying for it. What does he care? James Dennis was sent to death row after being framed. James Dennis was sentenced to death for the murder of a high school student back in 1991. After 25 years in jail, he was finally exonerated after the courts determined Dennis had not committed the crime, but had instead been framed by the police. The conviction was vacated in 2013 and affirmed on appeals in 2016. It was determined that police and the prosecution had withheld key evidence during his trial to secure their conviction. How do you do that? Why would you want to put an innocent man in jail? Because you can't find the real killer and you want to look good in your career? So you frame somebody for murder, send them to the electric chair? You had evidence that you withheld that could have helped this man? And they say mobsters are bad? Really? At least we did this among our own. These are going after innocent people. That includes confessions from witnesses laying the blame on someone else, as well as hiding some witnesses and coercing others. Witnesses claimed 3 men had committed the crime, and Dennis didn't match the description of any of them. A man actually confessed and gave details about the crime and his accomplices, but the police never shared the information with the defense. I don't get it. You had somebody that admitted to the crime, and they hid it, so they send an innocent man to jail. 25 years he spent. James Truelove was framed for murder and got 50 years, like my dad. James Truelove was convicted of a 2007 murder, sentenced to 50 years in prison. He was retried in 2015 and then acquitted for the crime, after which he sued the city of San Francisco, the result of which was a stunning $13.1 million settlement, thanks to just how badly the police had handled the case. So in other words, in San Francisco now, okay, you can be a drug addict, you could be a vagrant, you can go in the store and you can steal $950 worth of stuff. You can be a homeless person, go on a bridge where cars are coming underneath, throw stones down on them, crack their windshields, maybe cause accidents, somebody to get killed. You won't even get arrested, you won't even get bail. But if they want to frame you for murder and give you 50 years, that they'll do. Police had coerced a witness to testify that Truelove was the killer, while also hiding other evidence that proved he was innocent. The detectives on the case showed witnesses photos of Truelove, but no one else. This only came to light because when the police were telling the witness that it was Truelove, another suspect for a different crime was in the room and overheard. The cops would then pay the woman $63,000 to help her move. They had also learned of other suspects and didn't bother following up on them. In the end, though, Truelove won the settlement, the cops just retired, and no one was punished. That's another thing. Prosecutors, they have a lot of power. They can frame people. The FBI can frame people. They can put you in prison, send you to the electric chair or gas chamber or whatever. Nothing happens to them. Nothing. Can you imagine that? You destroy a person's life. You put your left hand on a Bible, right hand to uphold the law and order of the state or the city or the country, then frame somebody, destroy their life, and nothing happens to you. Figure that out. Is that our equal system of justice? 6, cops beat a murder confession out of an Armenian man. Armenian Armen Pogazian spent 5.5 years in prison on a 15-year conviction for the rape and murder of a child. He was released only when the actual murderer was caught. Initially, Pogazian confessed to the crime after being subject to abuse from officers during their questioning. Official documents state that he was beaten, and at one point an officer boxed his ears so forcefully his eardrum exploded. They forced him to sit on a glass bottle and made him listen as they beat his brother in another room. Do you believe what I just read? These are our police. This is what they did. And again, let me make this clear. This is not, I'm not condemning the entire police department. I'm not condemning the entire FBI. I'm not condemning the Department of Justice or prosecutors, but I'm telling you this happens. The same way our government lies to us, the same way they're allowing people over the border, the same way they're doing this. You know what? They came after us, but we were criminals. Was it right? No. Did they try to frame us? Yes, some of them did. But at least, you're all right, you organize crime, you're okay, it's not right, but you kind of can justify it a little bit. I get it, a little bit. But these are innocent people. After his conviction was overturned, he was awarded 6.2 million Armenian dollars in compensation, which works out to about $15,000. So they destroy this guy's life. He spends, 5.5 years in prison. They beat him up, they explode his eardrum, they beat his brother up, and he gets $15,000. And what happened to the cops? Nothing. Guaranteed nothing. Number 5, cops planted a rifle shell to convict Arthur Allen Thomas of murder, planting evidence. Some people are committed to lies, are so committed to lies, they'll do anything to support them. And that was the unfortunate case with the frame job of Arthur Allen Thomas, a man who spent 9 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. He was even convicted twice for the crime. Thomas was convicted of a double homicide in 1970. The conviction was thrown out after it was revealed police had taken a shell from Thomas's rifle and planted it in the garden of the victim to tie him to the crime scene. Forensics had been unable to rule Thomas's rifle out, but nor could they confirm his weapon was used, so the police put a shell in the garden weeks later after having custody of the rifle and then discovered it to clinch their arrest. It was the shell casing in specific that helped get Thomas released, as the police had searched the garden in August, but the shell was found in October, just 1 week after police got custody of the rifle. Despite the conviction being tossed out and Thomas getting a $1 million settlement, none of the police involved were ever held accountable. So in other words, taxpayers have to pay the bill for the police that framed the guy and nothing happens to them. How is this just? How do we justify this? When somebody commits a crime, it doesn't matter who they are. They should be prosecuted for it. There should be consequences. Doesn't matter that you wear a badge, or you're an FBI agent or a prosecutor, or the president of the darn United States. If you commit a crime, it's equal justice under the law. Doesn't matter who you are. It's not the way it is. Police and yes, I'm getting upset because I read this, I can't believe these are lives that are being destroyed, and taxpayers are footing the bill, and nothing happens to the people that are destroying those lives. How does it make sense? And you don't believe that our government is doing similar things today? Police in New Orleans planted a gun on shooting victims. 6 days after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, police got into what they claimed was a shootout on the Danziger Bridge in New Orleans. 2 civilians died, 4 more were injured. Police long claimed the killings were justified because they were returning fire and defending themselves from attack. That turned out to be false. In reality, the police fired unprovoked at their victims, who weren't even armed, and then engaged in a conspiracy to cover it up after the fact, framing the dead men as attackers. Officers agreed to falsify documents and witness statements after the shooting because they knew it wasn't justified. Later, a gun was planted on the scene, tied to one of the victims to support the lie, and the entire fake witness was made up to corroborate the police story. This led to 2 officers being charged, and they pled guilty later on. Well, okay, we got some justice. They suffered some consequences, finally. Planting evidence again. 3, Atlanta cops killed a grandmother, then planted drugs on her. You would hope that if the police are going to raid a home to catch criminals, they would do their due diligence to ensure they're raiding the right home. Far too often that turns out not to be true, and in this case, but sometimes it can get even worse. In 2006, Atlanta police raided the home of a 92-year-old woman in what was meant to be a drug raid. They shot Katherine Johnston 5 times and she died. They shot a 92-year-old woman. There were, of course, no drugs. Cops did plant marijuana on the scene, however, and submitted cocaine afterwards as evidence of drugs they'd bought in the house prior to the raid. Evidence after the fact showed that documents had been falsified to suggest drugs were on the site. Other court documents claimed that police in the city had made a habit of lying to obtain warrants in addition to fabricating evidence of drug deals. You know, people, I've said this, and I want to be clear on this. I've never said that there shouldn't be reform in police departments. Obviously, if things like this are happening, people have to be held accountable, and there should be reform, and this should start at the top. There's something wrong here with the culture of the police department when somebody can be a rogue like this and do this. Now, you know what? Okay, you went to the wrong house, but how do you shoot a grandmother, 92 years old, 5 times? Didn't say she had a gun on her. I don't get that. I don't understand it. But at least in the prior case, they were held accountable. 3 officers ended up going to jail for their part in the death and the cover-up, though they only got between 5 and 10 years in total. So for murder, they got 5 to 10 years. If that should have been me or you, we'd be doing life. Number 2, police doctored witness statements to convict a New Zealand man. Alan Hall spent 19 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit in New Zealand. Witnesses saw a man at the scene who looked nothing like Hall. They claimed the man had been Maori, but police removed that part because Hall was white. Other witnesses also claimed the man had dark skin, was much taller than Hall, was right-handed while Hall was a lefty, and was muscular while Hall was thin. He didn't match a single part of the description. Police also noted they believed Hall might have had intellectual disability, but continued questioning him anyway without his lawyer. Years later, it was determined that Hall was autistic. He was convicted in 1986. The prosecution had been aware since 1988 that police had doctored the witness statement, but did nothing about it. So they knew it, they did nothing about it. It was not until 2022 that the Supreme Court finally tossed out the conviction, eliminated any hope of appealing decision that Hall and his family finally got to end their fight. I don't know what to say. The last one. A Florida police chief arrested innocent people to boost his arrest stats. Let me tell you this, without even going further. Agents, prosecutors, they care about their career. They want to climb up the ladder. And too often, they will violate the law to do so. I've seen it done many, many times. If you get in a courtroom, sometimes you get sick on some of the things that you see. Trust me. People often accuse police of writing traffic tickets to meet quotas, and that's not entirely incorrect. Cops also like to clear a certain percentage of arrests to make them look efficient. And in Biscayne Park, Florida, police were willing to frame innocent people to keep their stats perfect. A 16-year-old boy was framed for multiple burglaries by the police chief and his officers, who arrested and charged the boy with 4 crimes, despite there being no evidence he was involved. The chief would later say he was under too much pressure and wanted to impress other officials by having a perfect arrest record. Give me a break. That kind of wimp you are? That pressure? So they just started arresting whoever they felt like and blaming them for the crimes. This means blaming black people for crimes in white neighborhoods. The 16-year-old was just one of several. He even bragged about how good his department was doing publicly. After he was caught, the chief was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Charges against the boy were dropped. Okay, well, at least he went to jail for that. People, these are not isolated cases. If I do a study, I'll bring you several. Do you realize how many people have been released from death row because of DNA evidence? And in many cases, it was prosecutorial misconduct that withheld evidence. Many cases. If you want, I can do another one. I can show you. There are dozens like that. But over 100 people, I believe, were taken off of death row because they were wrongly convicted. And in many cases, there was prosecutorial or law enforcement misconduct. We have to stop this. We have to hold these people accountable. Trust me, law enforcement is not always right. When I go into prisons and I speak to young people, these gangbangers, I tell them, you're not going to win. Once you get that target or that bullseye on your back, you're not going to win. Stay away from it because it's a tough system at times. It's not always fair. This is sickening. And yeah, maybe you see me get a little bit hyped up on this because I've been through it. And it's ugly, and I don't like it, and it shouldn't happen. That's it for today, people. How do I always leave you? Same way. But before I do that, we have a couple of questions because I always promise 2 questions. So here they are. This is a good question. This person wants to know if the mob, Mafia, Cosa Nostra, ever had to deal with any of the street gangs that are, on the streets. And the answer is really no. We didn't have any trouble with them. They wouldn't dare come into our neighborhoods. We are very protective of our neighborhoods and our communities. And they knew better than to come in and to start up anything with us because it wouldn't be pretty for them, trust me. So, no, we never had any issues that I can remember, certainly not in my area in Greenpoint. Long Island, no, we never had any issues. There was kind of a respect for us, and they didn't mess with us. Next question, do I know anything about Carlos Marcello from New Orleans? Yeah, I do. He was the boss. Very well-respected guy. Actually, I did something on a prior video about the food that he loved. The interesting thing about Carlos, I actually knew somebody that knew him really well. I didn't know him, but I was in prison with somebody, Sam Fiorentino, that knew him very well. We talked a lot about Carlos. I have a lot of friends in New Orleans that knew him and talked about him, and they liked him. But let me tell you this, he confessed to being involved in the killing of JFK. I don't know if you know this, but he did. And everything I ever heard on the street from the right people were that it was a mob hit. And I've said this before. There are classified documents that have never been revealed so far. Normally they reveal them in many cases after 25 years. They haven't revealed these because I believe if they're telling the truth, you're going to show that the mob was involved in this hit, and the government doesn't want to reveal that the mafia was able to get to a sitting president. That's what I feel, that's what I believe, and Carlos Marcello was definitely involved in that. That's it for today. How do I always leave you? Same way. Be safe, be healthy. God bless every one of you. Go see Jesus Revolution. Yes, I'll see you next time. Take care.